Have you ever felt silence pressing so heavily it almost breaks you? Surrounded by noise, every laugh, every shout cutting deeper while you stay still. That quiet clings like a second skin, mistaken for weakness, misread as absence. Psychology calls it heightened sensitivity, your mind and body absorbing more, feeling more, noticing more. And this is what quiet feels like now. Every detail sharper, every pause heavier, every silence both shield and prison, not emptiness, but a presence the world refuses to see. We'll move past the cliches about shyness and look at what it truly means to grow up as the quiet child. You'll see why silence is read as absence, how high sensitivity shapes attention, emotion, and stress, and how being overlooked leaves marks that linger. Most importantly, you'll learn that quiet can become strength. Step by step, we'll name the signs, clarify the common struggles, and show simple first paths, questions to ask, spaces to create, skills to practice, so presence is finally seen and heard. The child sits quietly at the edge of the playground, not because he is lonely, but because he is observing, listening, and immersed in a rich inner world. To those who pass by, he may seem distant, almost invisible, yet inside him there is no emptiness. There is a storm of feelings and a river of thoughts that rarely reach the surface. Silence, for him, is not absence. It is the safest way of being present. He notices the small things that others rush past. The way a voice trembles at the end of a sentence, the flicker of a smile that hides disappointment, the sound of footsteps that hesitate before joining the game. Each detail is stored quietly, as if his mind is a camera, capturing what no one else thinks to notice. But how heavy it can feel, carrying so much that others never see. How lonely it is to understand what others overlook. In psychology, this depth is often called high sensitivity. His nervous system is tuned like a finely strung instrument, easily overwhelmed but also capable of hearing the softest notes of human experience. This sensitivity is both protection and burden. It allows him to feel the world with intensity, yet it also leaves him raw, uncertain, and vulnerable. His silence then becomes both gift and cage. It shields him from criticism, yet it keeps his voice hidden. It grants him clarity, yet it risks making him invisible. What looks like distance is often careful self-preservation. What feels like stillness is often quiet survival. And here lies the paradox of the quiet child. He is both guarded and open, both fragile and profound. To see him truly is to understand that silence is not a weakness to be fixed, but a language waiting to be heard. Society often associates silence with absence or incompetence, but it is actually a sign of a rich, thoughtful, and sensitive inner life. Quiet has always been misunderstood, treated like an empty room, when in truth it is a house filled with hidden light. How many times has a lowered gaze been taken for indifference? How often has a pause been mistaken for confusion? And how easily do we forget that still waters can be the deepest of all? Silence is not the lack of thought, but the slow unfolding of thought. It is not emptiness, but a vessel that gathers impressions, stores emotions, and lets meaning ripen in its own time. The quiet person listens when others rush to speak. The quiet child observes when others hurry past. The quiet soul carries more than words can hold, yet the world, in its haste, calls this distance, labels it weakness, and dismisses what it cannot immediately hear. To understand quiet, we must first unlearn our reflex to equate noise with presence. Loudness does not always mean truth. Quickness does not always mean clarity. Performance does not always mean depth. Silence, on the other hand, waits. Silence observes. Silence endures. Within it lies the ability to see what others overlook. The trembling voice, the half-finished smile, the hesitation no one else notices. What appears to be withdrawal is often care. What appears to be delay is often reflection. What appears to be fragility is often resilience, disguised. Still, how heavy it feels to carry this misjudged presence. To be seen as absent while your inner life is most alive. To be treated as incompetent while you are weaving meaning from fragments invisible to others. To be overlooked not because you lack depth, but because your rhythm is slower, your voice softer, your truths harder to catch in the storm of sound. Quiet becomes the language of those who see more, but are seen less. And perhaps this is where we must pause, not to judge but to listen. For if silence has been misunderstood for so long, then the next step is to ask, where does this silence come from? And what story does it carry within? Silence can stem from a natural temperament, a nervous system that prefers less stimulation, or it can develop as a defense mechanism when the surrounding environment is too harsh. For some, quiet is born with them, like a seed carried deep in the soil of personality. Their senses are finely tuned, their hearts quick to register what others barely notice. The noise that others call normal becomes overwhelming, the brightness of life too dazzling, the speed of interactions too sharp. They seek rest not in retreat, but in stillness, as if silence itself were the breath their body understands best. For others, quiet is learned, shaped not by nature but by necessity. When words are met with ridicule, when emotions are brushed aside, when a child's voice is treated as an inconvenience, silence becomes a shield. It is armor when the world feels unsafe. A hiding place built from countless lessons that speaking brings only pain. What begins as survival hardens into habit, and habit grows into identity. Quiet then is not chosen, it is inherited from echoes of old wounds. But can we truly separate what is innate from what is imposed? Quiet often grows from both directions at once. On one side, there is temperament, a nervous system tuned so finely that the world feels sharper, louder, heavier than it does to others. This child does not choose to be quiet, his body chooses for him. The flood of sensations makes stillness a necessity, silence a refuge, retreat the only way to breathe. On the other side, there is experience, the accumulation of moments when speaking felt unsafe, a harsh word, a dismissive gesture, a classroom that rewarded speed instead of care, a home where silence was safer than confrontation. Each moment, small on its own, layers into memory, teaching the child to hold back, to wait, to fold his voice inward. Quiet then becomes a scar, invisible yet lasting, stitched by the past. And what happens when sensitivity and survival meet? The quiet child is both wired to feel more and conditioned to express less. He knows the world in sharper colors, yet carries it in softer tones. His silence is not merely preference or protection, but a complex inheritance of body and history, instinct and environment. To search for the origin of silence is to realize it is never simple. It is not only nature, not only nurture, but the weaving of both. Quiet can be temperament, trauma, or training. Most often, it is all three: a nervous system too alive, a world too careless, and a child learning to survive. And this is where the path turns, toward understanding not just the existence of quiet, but the weight it carries and how it shapes the way a child grows into the world. Quiet children often notice small details that others miss, such as eye contact, gestures, or small shifts in attitude, and turn them into creative material. This ability is not accidental. It is born from silence itself. When the mouth does not rush to speak, the eyes are free to wonder. When the voice does not fight for space, the ears learn to listen more deeply. When the body stays still, the heart sharpens its sense of what moves around it. Observation then becomes their language. While others focus only on words, the quiet child hears the tremor behind them. While others see the face, he notices the tightening of the jaw, the hesitation of the breath, the glance that lingers too long. These micro moments, invisible to most, collect within him like pebbles in a pocket, small, ordinary, yet capable of building meaning that grows heavier with time. What others call background noise, he translates into signal. What others dismiss, he interprets as story. This way of seeing is not passive. It is active, deliberate, and deeply human. Quiet acts like a lens, magnifying the subtleties that slip through the noise. A crowded classroom, for example, is not chaos for him. It is a field of shifting expressions, nervous gestures, and unspoken dynamics. A family dinner is not routine, it is a theater of moods, where silence at one end of the table speaks louder than chatter at the other. To be quiet is not to withdraw, it is to notice more, to hold more, to read what is never said. And yet, to carry this kind of perception is not light. Every flicker of disappointment, every shadow of hurt, every silent plea becomes part of his inner archive. He may not voice it, but he feels it. He may not react, but he remembers. The world may see him as detached, but in truth he is entangled, woven into the details others rush past. The very skill that fuels creativity and empathy also risks becoming a weight of unspoken burdens. Still, this gift should not be mistaken for fragility. To observe so deeply is to participate in a different way. It is to contribute not through noise but through nuance, not through immediacy but through insight. Quiet children transform perception into creation, sketches that capture moods, stories that reveal truths, solutions that anticipate needs. Their silence is not a void but a workshop, where fragments of the world are shaped into meaning. And perhaps the question we must carry forward is this: if such rare perception sets the quiet child apart, how does he learn to live with it in a world that often demands performance? Does he wear a mask to blend in, or does he retreat further into silence to protect himself? Some children learn to wear a mask of extroversion, which can be exhausting, while others choose to withdraw, further distancing themselves from the world. Both paths are born from the same root, the need to survive in an environment that does not understand quiet. And both paths, though different in shape, carry the same cost: a slow erosion of self, a constant negotiation between being seen and being safe. The mask is often the first strategy. It is a borrowed costume, a role rehearsed until it almost feels natural. The quiet child studies the loud, copies their gestures, mimics their sparkle. He learns to laugh when his heart feels heavy, to speak quickly when his mind longs for pause, to shine brightly when all he wants is to rest in shadow. On the surface, he appears to fit in. Teachers praise his confidence, friends welcome his presence, society rewards the illusion, yet each performance drains him. Every forced smile, every rushed word, every practiced gesture leaves him further from his true rhythm. The mask promises belonging, but it costs authenticity. Withdrawal, on the other hand, offers relief. It is the strategy of retreat, the quiet child stepping back into shadows. Here he can breathe, think without interruption, feel without judgment. Silence becomes sanctuary, distance becomes protection, invisibility becomes comfort. But comfort hardens into distance, and distance deepens into isolation. What begins as rest becomes confinement. What begins as choice becomes cage. Hiding keeps him safe, but also keeps him small. So which is better, the mask or the retreat? Both protect, yet both wound. Both promise relief, yet both demand sacrifice. The mask erases authenticity, the retreat erases opportunity. The mask drains the spirit, the retreat shrinks the world. And in between these two imperfect paths, the quiet child is left wondering, How do I belong without losing myself? How do I stay safe without disappearing? How do I live quietly without being forgotten? Psychologists call this tension a coping strategy, but for the child, it is a constant calculation of survival. Each interaction feels like a crossroad, to mask and perform or to retreat and disappear. Neither path promises joy, both exist to avoid pain. The mask secures acceptance but empties the self. Withdrawal preserves authenticity but erases opportunity. Adaptation becomes not a way to flourish, but a way to minimize damage, a fragile balance between exposure and protection. Over time, these strategies carve deep patterns. The child grows skilled at scanning for danger, quick to adjust tone, cautious with expression. He anticipates reactions before they occur, steps forward when the risk is low, vanishes when the cost feels too high. What looks like resilience is in truth vigilance. What looks like adjustment is in truth compromise. Adaptation for the quiet child is rarely about becoming more, it is about surviving with less. And perhaps this leads us to the next question. If survival strategies can protect but also confine, what can help quiet children move beyond endurance toward growth? How can they be guided not only to adapt but to belong on their own terms? Children who are less demanding are often overlooked, as attention in families and schools is given to those who speak more loudly, leading to feelings of deprivation. Quiet does not shout for space. Quiet does not insist on being heard. Quiet waits, and in the waiting, it is too often forgotten. The louder voices claim the stage, the brighter gestures draw the eye, and the quiet child learns early that in a world measured by volume, silence is mistaken for absence. Yet absence is only a misreading. The quiet child is there, sitting in the circle, walking in the hallway, listening at the table. His needs are as real as anyone's, but they are folded inward, like unopened letters at the bottom of a drawer. He does not demand, so he is assumed content. He does not cry out, so he is assumed strong. He does not compete, so he is assumed indifferent. 3 misreadings, 3 distortions, 3 ways his presence is erased before it is ever seen. This neglect does not always wound loudly. It erodes quietly, like water carving stone. A child who whispers learns to lower expectations. A child who waits too long begins to believe waiting is all he deserves. A child who goes unnoticed starts to feel unworthy of notice. These are not sudden fractures, but slow dissolutions. Confidence fading, belonging thinning, trust dissolving, and what is more dangerous than wounds no one sees. In families, the loudest laughter is celebrated, the strongest demands answered. In classrooms, the raised hand earns attention, the quick answer praise, the outspoken student the teacher's gaze. Where then is the space for the quiet child who processes slowly, who hesitates before speaking, who listens more than he asserts? If presence is equated with noise, does quiet ever truly exist in the eyes of others? The overlook is not simply to forget, it is to strip meaning from what is alive. Quiet is not an empty shell, but a softer pulse, a presence waiting for recognition. Yet when unnoticed, that presence risks dissolving into the background. Each time a quiet child is passed over, silence is mistaken for insignificance, hesitation for weakness, stillness for absence. Over time, these judgments sink inward, teaching the child that his needs are unworthy, his thoughts unnecessary, his presence disposable. The danger is not only that others fail to see him, but that he begins to believe there is nothing worth seeing. Neglect does not come only through harshness, it also comes through absence. To ignore the quiet child is to undervalue the truth carried in silence, to miss the wisdom written in gentleness. The pressing question remains: if quiet so easily disappears in the noise of life, how can we create spaces where it is not dismissed but honored? Quiet people often express themselves slowly and indirectly. sometimes making it difficult to be noticed in a world that values quickness and sharp words. Their rhythm is different. Their pace is gentler, their language less about speed and more about weight. While others speak as if words were arrows to be released instantly, the quiet shape their words like clay, turning them over in their hands until meaning takes form. This difference is not a lack, but a distinction. Quick voices are like sparks, bright, sudden, momentary. Quiet voices are like embers, steady, glowing, lasting. Sparks draw attention, but embers give warmth. Sparks dazzle in an instant, but embers sustain over time. So whose fire do we truly need when the night grows long? For the quiet child, expression is often layered. A single sentence may carry days of thought. A pause may hold more truth than an entire flood of words. He does not rush because he understands that words are fragile, that once released they cannot be gathered back. His hesitations are not ignorance but care. His silence is not absence but preparation. He speaks less, but when he does, his words often carry the weight of reflection. Yet this difference is easily misunderstood. In classrooms, the child who hesitates is labeled slow. In families, the one who pauses is called shy. In society, the listener is mistaken for someone with nothing to say. But is a river shallow because it flows gently? Is a book empty because its pages turn slowly? To mistake quiet expression for weakness is to miss the richness of a different rhythm. The quiet child communicates through subtleties others overlook. Through the tone of listening, the timing of a glance, the patience of a pause. His language is not built on speed, but on sensitivity. His contribution is not the first word spoken, but often the truest word remembered. Still, because the world prizes quickness, his expressions slip into shadow, and what could have been recognized as wisdom is too often lost as delay. This is the difference that defines quiet, not an absence of voice, but another form of voice. Not less expression, but slower expression. Not weaker communication, but deeper communication. And so the challenge arises. If society rushes past subtlety, how do we learn to slow down enough to hear the quiet rhythm and honor the unique way it carries truth into the world? Silence is not a weakness, but a different way of participating. Patient, able to hold and nurture complexity, opening up depth in thinking and communication. It does not rush to fill the air. It does not fight for space. It creates space. Like a vessel waiting to be filled, silence holds room for what is fragile to emerge, for what is hidden to take form. And is that not a kind of strength in itself? To wait when others hurry, to hold when others release, to listen when others speak. The quiet child embodies this hidden power. While others fill the air with quick words, he waits, noticing the shifts in tone, the tremors in expression, the pauses that reveal more than sentences ever could. His silence is not passivity but presence, not emptiness but depth. He participates by absorbing, by reflecting, by carrying the conversation in directions others may not have considered. Silence, for him, is not an absence of voice, but an alternative form of voice. We often mistake noise for contribution, as if the fastest word were always the most meaningful. Yet what does silence teach us? It teaches patience, reminding us that not every truth can be rushed. It teaches perception, allowing us to see the details that noise drowns out. It teaches humility, showing us that wisdom can rest quietly without demanding applause. 3 lessons, 3 gifts, 3 values hidden in what the world so often ignores. To hold silence is to nurture complexity. It is to recognize that thoughts need time to ripen, that emotions need space to breathe, that understanding grows in stillness. Just as the soil must rest for seeds to root, so must the mind pause for insight to take shape. The quiet child lives within this rhythm. His contributions may come later, but when they arrive, they carry the weight of reflection, the clarity of distilled thought, the echo of careful listening. Yet silence is fragile. Without recognition, it risks being dismissed as absence, confused with weakness, mistaken for indifference. Its value shines only when others are willing to slow down and listen, to honor the soft voice that carries steady truths. The question, then, is urgent. In a culture that prizes speed and sound, how can we learn to embrace silence as wisdom and to honor the quiet as a way of belonging, not a way of disappearing? Recognize slow response rates, ask open-ended questions, create appropriate roles, and teach, step-by-step, expressive skills. Without such care, quiet children risk carrying an invisible wound, the belief that their voices do not matter. Once planted, this belief can stretch across years, shaping how they see themselves, how they relate to others, and how they take up space in the world. Quiet, by its very nature, does not demand. It does not shout for space, does not insist on being heard, and because it does not insist, it is too often overlooked. To nurture quiet is to respect a different rhythm of expression. The quiet child holds words as if they were glass, fragile, delicate, needing time before release. Rushing breaks trust. Interrupting silences not only the voice, but also the courage that carried it forward. Patience here is not simply waiting, it is validation. It tells the child, your rhythm is valid, your silence has meaning. Your voice carries weight even if it comes slowly. Support also requires the right kind of invitation. Closed questions are walls, open questions are doors. A simple, "What do you think?" or "How did that feel for you?" may appear small, but to a quiet child, they are lifelines. They signal that his perspective is valued, not tolerated, wanted, not optional. And with each such opening, belonging takes root and trust grows stronger. Roles must also be shaped with care. Not all children need the spotlight, but every child deserves a place where their strengths shine. Quiet thrives in roles where attentiveness is power, empathy is leadership, and observation is contribution. To design such spaces is to affirm that gentleness is not weakness and subtlety is not absence. When the quiet child is given these opportunities, he learns that who he is can matter without pretending to be someone else. Expression must also be nurtured gradually, like tending a garden. A child cannot leap from silence to eloquence in a single stride. Growth requires soil, water, sunlight, encouragement instead of pressure, guidance instead of criticism, safety instead of fear. Each small step. Offering an idea, voicing a need, sharing a feeling, becomes a rehearsal for presence, proof that quiet can transform into expression without abandoning itself. And yet, without this care, the risks are profound. Silence may be mistaken for emptiness. Stillness may be confused with indifference. Patience may be misread as weakness. Over time, these misinterpretations do not remain outside. They sink inward, carving identity. What begins as being unseen by others hardens into overlooking oneself. And is there any deeper wound than believing your own voice is unnecessary? The responsibility then belongs to us. Parents, teachers, companions, communities. To nurture quiet is not to force noise, but to honor rhythm. To shelter silence is not to treat it as absence, but as presence. To guide expression is not to erase quiet, but to let it unfold in its own way. For within every quiet child lies a voice waiting for trust, a depth waiting for recognition, and a presence that, once honored, reminds us all that silence is not emptiness. It is another language of belonging, one that deepens the world if we only choose to listen. Silence is not emptiness, it is a quieter form of truth. The quiet ones remind us that depth does not shout, and gentleness is not weakness. When we learn to notice, to listen, to honor, we change the way the world holds them, and ourselves. If this message speaks to you, stay with us. Follow this channel for more reflections, more stories, more reminders that even in silence, there is a voice worth hearing.